KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Pre-qualification is available at splatero.com.
Welcome back to another edition of the KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. I'm Beth Accomando. It's October, my favorite month of the year, because I can unabashedly focus on my passion for horror. Last podcast, I looked to Italian horror, and I highly recommend you check that out because it includes interviews with Lucio Fulci's daughter and actress Catriona MacColl, as well as with Fulci's frequent composer, Fabio Frizzi. For this podcast, I turned to one of my horror obsessions, Clive Barker. A year ago, I posted an archive interview with Barker for episode number 35. Barker's a marvelous interview. He's articulate, witty, charming, and the last person you'd ever suspect could imagine such horrific worlds as Hellraiser.
The box. You opened it. We came.
It's just a puzzle box!
Oh no. It is a means to summon us.
Who are you?
Explorers in the further regions of experience. Demons to some, angels to others.
Barker's a Renaissance man. He's an artist, novelist, and filmmaker. I came to his work through his films, specifically Hellraiser. I saw that film in 1987 and fell in love with his take on the genre, which combined beauty with terrifying body horror.
Hellraiser, a film by Clive Barker.
We'll tear your soul apart.
One of the things I love about Barker is that he never judges his characters, but rather he tries to capture the essence of what it is that fascinates us about horror. He's also able to evoke sympathy for unlikely protagonists. In his book Cobble, the source material for his film Nightbreed, he introduces us to Midian, a netherworld of monsters that he makes human and sympathetic.
Who's buried in Midian?
Ain't nothing but dead folk.
Somewhere, hidden from sight, closer than you might think, is a place that's not on any map. Midian.
Something's breeding there.
It looks a lot like hell, but they call it home.
There goes the neighborhood.
They're not pretty. They're not neighborly.
You'll come back now, you hear?
They're not even human. But this time, they're the good guys. From the imagination of Clive Barker comes Nightbreed.
You can't go down there!
They have only one enemy. A beast called man, sworn to destroy the Nightbreed.
Sounds like we're going head-to-head with the devil himself.
And only one chance. A man. Called Boone.
It's time to fight! Go get 'em, boys! I'll kill you all! What chance have we got? They're armed. So am I.
Out of your deepest fears and your darkest fantasies, Clive Barker brings you a startling new breed of adventure. I won't let you down. Nightbreed. At last, the night has a hero.
Outstanding.
James Whale was the first filmmaker to really make us feel sympathy for the monster with his 1931 Frankenstein. But Barker took it to new levels with Cobble and then with the film Nightbreed. For Nightbreed, Barker cast fellow horror filmmaker David Cronenberg as a serial killer.
Well, when you imagine yourself being taken away to this invented city, to Midian, what sins were you going to be forgiven?
Are we back in therapy, Doctor? They were just dreams. Midian doesn't exist. Monsters don't exist.
But murder does, Aaron. Murder is very, very real. It might start in the mind, but then it changes to flesh and blood. 2 days ago, the police brought me some photographs. They wanted to know if any of my patients was capable of doing what's in those photographs. I'm going to show them to you.
And when I was going through my archives, I found this interesting piece of tape with Cronenberg talking about how he and Barker came at horror from different perspectives. Here's an excerpt from that 1996 interview.
Clive's approach to what he does is so different from mine. Mm-hmm. It was even apparent on Nightbreed when I was making suggestions, about the script, and I thought, Clive, this doesn't really make any sense. He didn't care that it didn't make any sense, and I did. I like sort of the logic of madness is, we both are interested in madness, but I'm particularly intrigued by the logic of madness, the rationale of madness that we make. So that I'm interested in Descartes' theories, philosophy, because it's sort of so logical, it's insane, and I like that. Clive is totally into this completely sort of invented spiritual other world stuff, which I actually don't like. I don't like his stuff. But it's not something as a director that I would really be interested in doing. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't resonate for me in that sort of socket and plug way, you see. So the chances that Clive would write something that I would be interested in directing are slim, just because of that.
Would you act for him again?
Oh, of course. He was lovely as a director. He was great, just great fun, great set. I think he was a little overwhelmed on that film because it grew. It was supposed to be quite a small film, and then it became quite a big, heavy-duty effects film. Mm-hmm. And I think he was a little overwhelmed. Not that he ever showed it, because he was always incredibly sweet and funny on the set. So no, I like Clive. I consider a friend. And I think he's extremely talented.
For the rest of this podcast, I speak with Mark Allen Miller about Barker and about finding all the elements to assemble the director's cut of Nightbreed. When released in 1990, studio meddling caused the film to not be what Clive Barker had envisioned. It wasn't until 2012, after Miller found workprint footage that had been thought lost, that a cobble cut was screened at film festivals to generate interest in restoring the film to what Barker's original vision was. Then in 2014, the director's cut was completed, much to Barker's joy. Here's my interview with Mark Allen Miller. So Nightbreed is a film that I adore, and I was so excited that when I was in London, I got an opportunity to see the cobble cut, and now you have a director's cut version. Tell me how this whole process started. How did you get involved working on this Nightbreed revision?
It's a long, winding road, and I'm so glad you asked, because I'm always happy to talk about it. I actually befriended Clive in a strange series of events, and had started working for him as a sort of unpaid intern. And in hanging out with Clive, you can't really not be inspired by him just because of who he is. And the more time I spent with him, the more I wanted to know about him. So I would go home after working all day, learning about him, and then and go home and do more research so that I could learn even more. It was a full immersion internship, and in that research, I discovered through IMDb that Nightbreed had not been the film that he wanted it to be. And it was when I checked the IMDb message boards, I started to see that there was all this talk about when the director's cut would come out and all the scenes that were missing. And since I had a direct line to Clive, I just thought, well, everyone seems to have a projected release date. Might as well ask the man himself if this is all true, and if it is, when it'll be, and because, more than anything, I just want to see it. So I sent him a text message and asked him if it were true and when the possible release date might be. And he fired back a flurry of texts almost immediately, just saying, "My God, Mark, yes, and this is an old wound, and there are many, many minutes of footage that are gone, but nobody knows where they are, and it's not for want of trying. We've done everything we could, and it's just been a completely fruitless endeavor up to this point." So I responded with a simple, "Hey, would you mind if I gave it a shot?" And he said, "Absolutely, please go for it. It would be my honor." And when Clive Barker gives you a sort of imperative like that, you can't help but kind of sink your teeth in and not let go until it's done. And so it was this very Byzantine road that ended 6 years later with eventually the Blu-ray release. But there were a lot of twists and turns in between, and it's only now that we're able to talk about all of them.
And were you involved in that Kabul cut?
Yeah. That's how that's sort of how the grassroots movement to get the film released on Blu-ray happened. I started the journey by interviewing a few people that Clive set me up on interviews with. One of the people was Mark Goldblatt, who was the editor that Morgan Creek, who's the production company on Nightbreed, they brought him in to replace Clive's editor, Richard Martin. And it was Goldblatt who told me that there's probably some VHS footage somewhere of the dailies and maybe a work print, something like that. So while I was calling Morgan Creek and storage facilities and stuff like that, asking if they had any, old canisters lying around marked Nightbreed, I interviewed Goldblatt, who told me about this. And I think it was just, maybe it was timing. I'm not sure what it was, but, there were a lot of sort of benchmarks along this journey that are a little bit too serendipity to be labeled accidents. But while I was doing that, after Goldblatt mentioned it, there was a sort of spring cleaning happening at Clive's offices. And in the back of a storage closet, we found a bunch of old tapes that just said Nightbreed. Since I was at that point dubbed the Nightbreed detective, I was given the tapes to take home and watch, but I couldn't watch them because they were PAL encoded. So we sent them to his archivists in London, and they reported back that yes, there was missing footage that no one had seen in 25 years, and it was amazing. And so, we initially screened just that VHS that we found at a convention in Indiana for Horror Hound magazine. And it was from that we started to get a little more attention, and some people started coming around. Friends of the company, a gentleman named Russell Charrington in particular, asked if he could see the footage. And he'd been a longtime friend of the company. And, obviously, we said, sure, by all means, those who are sort of in the inner circle should absolutely be able to see this. And he went and gave that VHS footage to a friend of his named Jimmy Johnson, who's an editor. And Jimmy put the missing footage and intercut it with the Warner DVD that was available at the time. It was just the theatrical cut. But he put the pieces of the VHS footage in where they were supposed to be, and from that emerged this extra cut, which was really rough, and it was, you saw it. It was 25-year-old degraded VHS footage that had been sitting in a storage unit for just as long. So the audio was bad, the footage was bad, some of the scenes were barely decipherable, and it wasn't really in the proper order. It was just this sort of work print fan edit that got made, and we were able to tour it around to enough people. It seemed like every screening that happened, another person heard about it and reached out to us and asked if they could screen it. And so by the end of the run, we had screened on, half the continents out there. And there were articles in Total Film and Empire and Entertainment Weekly and all this stuff, and we were getting all this attention. So finally, Morgan Creek realized that there actually is something to this film, and they sort of joined the hunt with us in searching for the missing actual film negative.
Remind people why the film was not what Clive Barker had intended it to be. Because this was it was made in 1990. What was released to the mainstream and theatrical wasn't exactly what he had in mind.
Right, not remotely. It's based on a book that he wrote of the same name, and the story in the novel is not what the theatrical cut is, that exists. And legend has it that the studio signed on. He's Clive Barker. He's at sort of the height of his fame. we'll take whatever you want to give us, essentially. And then they start seeing dailies, and it's not the film that they thought they were going to get. It's this kind of high fantasy with outlandish elements. And I think the studio got spooked. They wanted Hellraiser. They wanted something spooky. They wanted something that would get under your skin, not this completely different fable, that was an allegory and had a moral and all this stuff. And so they started to ask Clive to change things. And he fought back, but, started shooting alternate scenes and trying to acquiesce to their demands, but still try to maintain his vision. But ultimately, by the end of it, they took away, they sort of removed him from the process entirely and changed, the voices of some of the performers. They changed whole scenes. They gouged the ending. There's a whole subplot where Boone's therapist is trying to set him up for these murders, and that's lost. And it's just, it becomes this kind of hodgepodge of what might have been. And so the theatrical cut is kind of half what Clive wanted and half this studio-mandated shock film. And so it just ends up being in this middle ground that no one quite understood. I mean, it's still, there was still nothing quite like it, which is why I think the fans endured. But there was always the film it was supposed to be. And that's what we set out to make happen.
Well, from our perspective today, sometimes I think it's hard for people to remember when a film came out, how the mood was different or how the studios were looking at films different. Because kind of the twist to this when it came out was that the monsters that look bizarre are the heroes, which nowadays we kind of feel like, oh, what's the big deal about that? Look at all the films, Guillermo del Toro makes. But back then it was much more... It kind of broke the rules much more than it would for something coming out now.
Yeah, it was definitely ahead of its time in that way. You hit the nail on the head. If you look at the ad campaigns, it shows Boone's girlfriend, Laurie, with this terrified expression on her face. And, Laurie was wrong. Laurie will find out. And there's no reason to fear the night and all this stuff. When you watch the film, the monsters are the heroes, and it's the establishment that are the villains. And so the ad campaign doesn't even really match the film that they created. But that was Clive's intent, was he always identified with the monsters. He always grew up loving the monsters, so he wanted to make a love letter to monsters. And now that's everything that comes out. You have your Twilights and all this stuff, and there's even I wrote an essay in an annotated version of the novel, where at one point I sort of pivoted in my opinion of the film, where originally it was just sort of the fan quest that I was on. I just wanted to see the footage until the first time I saw the film on the big screen. And I'm seeing the ending. It's still the degraded VHS footage, but it's in front of it's on this huge screen at the TIFF Lightbox in Toronto, and the house is packed and people are dead silent. And it's this scene where Boone and Laurie are on a hill and she's dying, and she's asking him to give her eternal life so that they can be together forever.
I belong to the breed now.
And make me belong too. They made you one of them. You can do the same for me.
I can't.
But I want to be with you.
I'll come back for you when I'm finished.
When's that going to be? When I'm 90 and you're still the way you are? I went through hell to find you, and you're just gonna walk away. Just go. Just go. Get out of here! What do you want? Go!
Please. Die.
Then do something, damn it. Remember what you said.
Please. Don't let it be too late. No.
And it was then that I realized this was a much more powerful film than I had even given it credit. And from then on out, the mission switched to, wouldn't it be cool to get this out, to, no, this movie is so far ahead of its time and so groundbreaking that I think it's important that it comes out.
Talk a little bit about the changes that occurred between the Cobble cut and the director's cut, because if people have seen the Cobble cut, what should they be expecting from this director's cut?
They should be expecting clarity. Obviously, it is a Blu-ray and it's a full restoration. We also managed to work miracles with the audio, so it's true 5.1, which is amazing because we had this guy named Justin Cruz who basically took all we were able to find was film footage. We didn't find any original audio files. So the audio files we worked with came from the VHS source, and Justin was able to create a 5.1 track from that VHS audio somehow. The man is a wizard. But aside from technical specs, it is the novel from start to finish. Everything is in there, and it's just gorgeous. There's subtleties, there are character developments, there's a musical sequence, there's more monsters, and there's a lot of heart, and it's this gorgeous story that just comes full circle. And I'm so honored to be a part of it because not only do I think it's an important film, not only do I think it's a great film, even if I had nothing to do with it, it would still be one of my favorite films. Every time it's on, I have to watch it. My attention is immediately engaged, and it's just there's nothing quite like it.
If memory serves me right, the Cobble cut was very long, like 3 hours or two and a half.
Yeah, it was. Eventually, we ended up calling that the kitchen sink version because there were a lot of scenes that kind of doubled up. I mean, there were even characters that died twice. There's a sequence where Captain Eigerman, who's sort of the head of the police department, and this just marauding jackass who storms the battlefield and just lays waste to all these innocent people. He dies twice in it. I believe we kept both endings. There's one which was the studio mandated ending where the priest comes to the shrine of Decker, the villain, and Decker comes alive, and the camera sweeps back, and that was a theatrical version, which Clive had never intended to be a part of the film. And the real ending is this far subtler thing where the priest and Eigerman get together and plot their revenge on the Nightbreed, and then before the priest leaves, he chokes Eigerman to death, and as Eigerman's body, falls to the floor, the priest walks out of the chapel. It's this far subtler and creepier sequence, but I think we had both in at one point, and it just became this work print. Might even be putting it kindly. It was just every bit of footage we could find had been thrown in just so people could see what could have been. And when we set out to edit what would ultimately become the director's cut, my editor, Andrew Furtado, who was given a month to do this and put it all together, again, another wizard. I don't know how he did it, but he's amazing. Took all the sequences, matched them up for film to VHS, and then systematically started putting the story together from start to finish. And as we found pieces, we would bring them to Clive, ask him where they went, and if they stayed or if they left. And we ended up cutting, I think, a good 20 minutes from the length of the work print. And what we have is a much tighter, much leaner, and much more linear and coherent story.
So Clive was very active in this director's cut in terms of what stayed in and what was taken out.
Oh, absolutely. There were even some controversial choices. There's in the book, Decker, the villain, his mask talks to him as if, it's this compulsion that he feels to kill people, and it's always the mask that is sort of making it happen, where he'll open up a briefcase and the mask is there telling him, do it. It feels good. Let's do a little more. And there are some scenes in the movie where we get the mask talking to Decker. This was in the work print. We found some of these scenes, and as we were watching it, we would take every time we had a new cut, we would bring it to Clive. We would watch it start to finish. He would give notes the entire way through, and then we would start again the next day and just work our way through. So we ended up watching the film probably 100 times in those 30 days just to get it as tight and as perfectly as Clive wanted it to be. And one of the more startling decisions that Clive made was to cut that sequence, because it didn't really. It was cool, and it was this nod to the novel, but there wasn't really any precedent for it in the film. You see Decker killing a lot before we get to that sequence. And so by the time we get there, Clive didn't feel that it made sense to keep it in just to keep it in. As one of his great quotes is, everything in service to the story. And so he felt what was in service to the story there was, leave that out. But I think it can be seen, I think that sequence is actually available on the bonus content. And it's a cool little thing to see. But there's a lot of stuff like that. And there's even, we didn't just take stuff out, we actually put some stuff in. There's a whole prophecy element to the film that didn't even make it into the work print, that we've discovered through editing and through reading the old script and reading the novel. It was this thing that we just kind of had to tease out. It's what ends up being the last shot of the film, and this is another one of those sort of synchronicity kind of moments where everything was kind of too perfect to work out this way. The film references this prophecy at the beginning and is this touchstone throughout various parts of the film. And then finally what happens is the sort of old god that runs the Nightbreed tells us that the prophecy is now complete and sort of the second phase of this story is about to begin. And when he says that, we see our two heroes, Boone and Laurie, standing on a hill. And the last shot is supposed to be from that hill we dissolve to this mural, which is how the film begins and was supposed to bookend the film. The opening credit sequence is a mural of the Nightbreed throughout their travels history. And the final shot of the film was supposed to be Boone and Laurie joining the ranks of all the people we saw on the mural in the beginning. But that shot was never created, because by the time it was time to shoot that, Morgan Creek had moved on and wanted, a different kind of film, and so that set was destroyed. Clive said he came to the set one day and found that the mural had just been demolished. And so we never found that in the footage. And what ended up happening was I was just talking with a coworker he's my writing partner, and he runs things with us at Clive's company, Seraphim. His name's Christian Francis, and he was involved in the process all the way too. He built all the websites for the screenings. He did all the limited posters for every festival we went to. And I was telling him that we had hit a wall, and that we've scoured the footage. It was like 16 hours of raw footage, and there was not even a glimpse of this final image. And he said, hold on a second. And 15 minutes later, he sent me a high-resolution image of exactly what I had described to him. He had taken pieces of the mural, made one in Photoshop, and created exactly what was always supposed to be there. And we put it in, and it was perfect. It was the film from start to finish as it was supposed to be. And that night we screened it for Clive, and that was the first time that he watched Nightbreed and he cried. Like, it was there was no way to describe how it all came together or the feeling of watching Clive finally see the film he always wanted to see. But it was this incredible group effort that where none of it would have happened if it weren't for the labor of 1,000 people wanting to make this happen. So there's a lot of stuff in the film that wasn't there before.
You brought up the character of Decker, who is played by a filmmaker himself, David Cronenberg.
Indeed.
The footage you added, there's not a ton of new footage with him when I saw the Cobble cut. I haven't had a chance to see the director's cut yet because it's going to be screening here in San Diego on the big screen, so I decided to wait.
I look forward to your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it on the big screen, just like I saw the Cobble cut on the big screen. So, but you didn't add a lot of footage of him, but you added some really great moments that fleshed out that character in interesting ways.
Exactly. Yeah, that was some of the more bizarre choices that were made by the studio. I mean, you have this incredible, iconic figure playing this truly evil character, and to just cut out all the stuff that really makes you hate him didn't make any sense. But there's this whole subplot that's been added where you realize that he is the villain behind all of this. He's the mastermind, that this sick psychiatrist who tricks his patient into believing that he is committing murders just so he himself can continue to kill without prejudice. I mean, it's a genius invention, and it was completely gone in the theatrical cut, and I'm so happy that it's back.
In putting the director's cut together, did Clive talk at all about working with Cronenberg and about that character in the film?
Absolutely. It was a pretty amazing time for him. And what was most interesting, I think, was the fact that he and Cronenberg had only known each other in passing, so it wasn't this kinship of fellow horror directors appearing in each other's films. Cronenberg had just done Dead Ringers at Morgan Creek, and so one of the producers on Nightbreed suggested to Clive, "Hey, we just did this thing with Cronenberg. It seems like you guys are simpatico. What if I set up a meeting?" And from that meeting, Clive offered Cronenberg the role, and I'm so happy that happened.
Well, it's ironic or funny that I've been going through some archive interviews I have, and I had just found one of David Cronenberg where he talked about working on the film, and one of the things he mentioned is that he and Barker actually don't have kind of like similar points of view on types of horror that they enjoy. So he said it was an interesting, he said, sometimes he would make suggestions and Clive would just say no, but they respected each other. But he said no, I would never direct a Clive Barker, a film from a Clive Barker book, because that's just not my type of horror. But he said,
Sure.
He goes, I would act for him anytime.
Yeah, it's a fascinating combination because in so many ways it makes so much sense that they would pair up, but at the same time, no, they write completely different horror. So it's two titans coming together to make something completely different, and it's I'm happy it happened.
You said you started working for Clive Barker as an unpaid intern. So what was it about his work and about his particular brand of horror that attracted you so much?
The danger, I think, is the best way to explain it. I grew up loving horror films, so he was already on my radar as this horror titan. But there was something about what he did that really got to me. I was able to just devour horror wholesale. Whatever I could put in front of my face, I would just gobble it up. And it didn't matter, how dark it was, how violent it was, how gory it was. I just wanted more horror all the time. And for some reason, when I got to Clive, that's the only time I really got scared. I mean, I watched some of the weirdest horror movies when I was I wasn't even a teenager yet. I think I saw Eraserhead when I was 12, and Jacob's Ladder around the same time. And it could be argued that was too soon, but I still enjoyed them. I enjoy them on a different level now. But at the time, it was this very unique experience for me. But for all the horror I watched at a young age, I didn't see Hellraiser for the first time until I was 25. It just, the idea of it, what I saw, what I heard, just seemed too much for me. So I feel like I had to graduate to Clive. And so he was always this kind of upper level mind to me. And then after I graduated to the films, I realized he was a novelist, and that's when I really began to see what he was about. And I started reading his stuff, and it was a Magica that was kind of the call. That was my on the road, if you will. That was the thing that changed everything for me. And from that point on, I knew I needed to know everything about this guy. I needed to read everything he'd written. And then when I heard that, I could have the chance to meet him, I did everything I could to make it happen.
Well, and for me, at least for the films, one of the kind of perverse attractions is it's horror, and there's also this perverse kind of beauty to it that makes you feel a little guilty about it.
His films that you don't get in a lot of horror. He's only directed 3 films, and none of them are like the other, and none of them are like anything else that's ever been made. And so for that reason alone, I think he, completely deserves his place in the canon. But you're absolutely right. There's this gracefulness and this sensuality that is, for some reason, when you pair it with such visceral horror, it lives inside you, and it stays there, and it's fantastic, and it's terrible.
Hellraiser, I remember, was it was such an amazing film to see, and it was very much something like you haven't seen anything like it before, and you haven't seen anything exactly like it since.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's still nothing quite like it. Even the other Hellraiser films aren't like it. It's a singular vision.
If people aren't choosing to see Nightbreed, the director's cut, on a big screen, they can get it on Blu-ray, and there's also a commentary track with it, correct?
That is correct. A commentary track that Clive and I recorded together in his writing room, and we also we won an award for it. Little known fact: the much lauded Rondo Horror Award. I'm sitting in my home office looking at it right now, and I feel like a proud papa.
And what kind of a commentary track is it? Are both of you talking about what's been added, what's been taken away? Or are you commenting on just the story itself?
It's pretty much everything. It's us talking about what had been taken away, what was taken from him on set, things that the actor said to him during that time, and then him seeing the things cut together. And just reacting. A lot of it is this very real-time reaction to the film, because it was still new to him. He'd seen the various cuts, but he'd only seen the final version once or twice before then. And so it's still, you get a lot of him just stopping and watching this film play out that he waited 25 years to see finally happen. And so I think if I may, if you'll allow, I think it is an award-winning commentary track. It's certainly one of the most emotional ones I've ever been a part of.
And what do you hope for the future of this? Do you hope that it gets screened more on large screens at festivals and maybe even midnight circuit?
Absolutely. I want this thing to live in perpetuity. I mean, I've met so many people on the road while screening the different versions of the film that it completely changed my life. I met people that saw the theatrical version, opening weekend, and it was their birthday, and it just happened to coincide with their birthday again at the convention, and they told me what the film means to them, and people would show me their Nightbreed tattoos, and there's one man I met in Toronto told me he went and saw the film alone, and it was his birthday present to himself, and the movie means so much to so many people that I would be happy if I never made another film again and just got to tour Nightbreed year after year and listening to people talk about what the film means to them. It's really, there's no experience like it.
And I know that Clive Barker has had health issues recently. We've missed him at many conventions in recent years. And how is he doing now?
He's doing really well these days. The health issues that plagued him really seem to be dissipating, and we're really grateful for that. He was in a coma a few years ago, and he'd sort of been in and out of the hospital since then. But of late, he has been steadily better and better. And I've seen him at work writing novels. He's currently writing 5 novels at the same time, and back in meetings with people and just pitching ideas again. And it's good to see him have that creative spark and that lust for life again. It's been a really good year.
Do you think we'll see another film directed by him?
I think that is a distinct possibility. It is definitely something he talks about. There are a lot of books that he has to finish. There's three. He's written 3 Aberrat books and needs to finish 2 more. He's written 2 art books and needs to finish one of those. And he's written a book called Galilee, and he's also working on the sequel to that. And so I know he wants to get all the book sequels done first. But in the meantime, he does talk a lot about returning to directing and what that would look like. And that's a pretty exciting conversation to be a part of.
Yes, as someone who loves film above all else. I mean, that's my passion. It's like he has so few films that he's directed, and I just want to see like a bigger collection.
Yeah,
of that.
The 3 Barker films are so amazing that you can't help but sit back and go, I need more in my life.
Yes. So I hope that with all those other projects demanding his attention, that he finds some time to squeeze in a film as well.
I'll tell him. I'll let him know.
Well, I also had the opportunity to see some of his artwork recently at a convention. I think it was Monsterpalooza or Son of Monsterpalooza. And I have to say, I have his art books, but it was the first time I saw one of his paintings in person. It was so impressive to see the thickness of the paint and kind of the almost like the violent strokes. It was like I felt like I wanted to reach out and touch it. I was going like, it's not fair that you can't see that like on the printed page.
Yeah, it's a real experience, isn't it?
Yes.
There's nothing quite like a Clive Barker painting in person, and I think a lot of people don't realize the scale at which he paints too. And the canvases are as tall as I'm 6'2", and I've stood in front of canvases that are easily twice my height, and it's amazing. And he uses whatever is in front of him. So you said, there seems to be this almost a violence to it. There is. I've watched him paint, and he takes knives to his canvases, forks. I've seen him paint with sandpaper and paper towels and whiteout and saline nasal spray. It's the image that's in his head is coming at him so fast, and he needs to get it out so he can get the next one on a canvas at such a rate that he doesn't stop to think and go, oh, let's see what color next, maybe what paintbrush. It's literally the closest thing next to him he grabs and he dashes it off because he has to. I've seen him paint with palm fronds and sticks and use cigar ash in the paint, and it's this completely raw process, and it's so cool to see.
Well, it shows up on the canvas because you really sometimes you feel like there's actual movement. I think I even creeped myself out at the one Monsterpalooza because I had this weird sensation that the image was moving, and I was kind of looking around going is there something with the lights that are
Oh, that's fantastic. She's going to love that. For the record, it totally moved.
Yeah, it totally feels that way. I wish you would do a documentary of him painting. I don't think I've ever seen footage of him painting. I don't know if that exists, but that sounds really fascinating.
I think there's a little. We did a little thing once in conjunction with DeviantArt. I'm not sure if it's still up, but I know at one point we did release it was maybe a 60-second clip of him painting something. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The office is fixed on about 1,500 canvases, and there's an energy that comes off those things that is definitely palpable. There's everyone has had an experience at the office that they can't quite explain.
That seems quite fitting.
It makes sense, right?
Well, and I've been listening to the Books of Blood on audiobooks.
A wise decision.
Well, and also I've chosen to do this while I go to the gym to work out. And I find this perverse quality of listening to these stories about so much body horror while I'm in the middle of a college gym, a university gym, where there's all these really young people super concerned about how they look.
Sure.
And I feel like I have this weird grin on my face while I'm listening and working.
I honestly can't think of a better context to listen to those audiobooks. That is fantastic.
It's been fun. I've been re-going through all of them. I think I'm on number 5 now, maybe, but it's fabulous. So
you're just walking around the gym going, everyone is a book of blood, people. Once you're open, you're red.
I forget, there was one in particular that just was particularly appropriate to be listening to. I don't know. It was one of the more extreme ones, and I was just thinking it was like body parts moving and melding and
that's great.
Taking shape, and I thought, this is perfect. And this is why I love his work so much.
Yeah. I might have to do that.
So do you have any immediate plans for the future for anything else working with him or on your own?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're always doing something. Right now, I'm not sure if there's anything I can actually discuss. We've closed deals on a couple of things. One, some movie stuff, some comic book stuff. There's a lot of stuff in the works. But I don't know if there's anything that we can actually mention at the moment. We will be making a few announcements at Stan Lee's Kamikaze on October 29th, which hopefully by then everything will be locked down and we'll be primed for a big worldwide expose.
All right, you big tease.
That's what I'm here for. Lots of good stuff, I promise.
That's all right. Well, that sounds exciting. Was there any moment in particular during this process, the 6-year process of putting together the Nightbreed, the various cuts, any moment in particular that really stands out as oh my God, I can't believe we found this, or this is great that this particular piece has come into place? Yeah,
there are so many moments. I think one of the big ones is Fright Fest, which is the screening you were at, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I arrived in London and I got to the theater and saw that there was a line around the block of people waiting to see Nightbreed, and it was I think that was the first time I realized that this was a lot bigger than, just me looking for some VHS tapes, and that we actually stood a chance here to get this release. And then another huge piece was sitting at Photochem with Cliff McMillan of Shout Factory as he and I went through boxes and boxes of actual film footage of Nightbreed. That was a moment I don't have words for. It was 4.5 years of searching and being told no, and the footage doesn't exist, and give it up, and who cares, and well, maybe there's something to this, and yeah, I guess it seems like people care, and then sure, we'll get a release, but we don't know where the film footage is, so we're just going to have to try and up-res the VHS footage as best we can. And then suddenly I'm sitting at Photochem and I'm actually watching this 35 millimeter print come through in little snippets, and it was just mental. I don't have the words. I was just speechless and remained speechless at that moment. And probably the biggest one was sitting in that room, in Clive's writing room, watching Nightbreed take shape in front of him, and then eventually when we hit the end and it's the film that he always wanted and he starts crying, it was amazing. And at that point, after the journey had ended and we reached picture lock and we recorded the commentary track, I've told this story before, but it's one of my favorite stories, because I never really knew how bad Clive felt about the whole experience. Once we finished recording the commentary track, I pulled out a copy, my old battered VHS copy of Nightbreed, and I put it in front of Clive and I said, now that we're at the end of this journey, would you sign this for me? And he looked me in the eye and he said, now that we're at the end of this journey, it doesn't hurt to. And I still get goosebumps just thinking about that. It was an insane experience, and I'm so grateful that Clive gave me the go-ahead, that he had faith enough in me to tell me, by all means, please see what you can do, and that through the efforts of dozens and dozens of people, we're sitting here now having this conversation, and Nightbreed is again going to scream. It's a dream come true.
And when did you actually record the commentary tracks?
That was about probably 2 days after we finished the final cut. It was we had a deadline. Once Shout Factory had digitized all the footage and given it to us, we had 30 days to give them everything. And so we just hit the ground running. We got the cut in that Clive wanted, and we had hours to spare. And so we set up a little podcast recording session, because the editor Andrew also does podcasting, and so we ran everything into Clive's room. We set up some microphones. Andrew recorded the commentary on his laptop while we watched the movie on Clive's computer, and then we rushed everything off to Shout Factory.
And what year was that?
That was, I believe, I want to say early 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have to do any crowdfunding to get this done?
No, which is I think the strangest thing. We did a lot of sort of crowdsourcing in a lot of ways, but not in a financial capacity. A lot of it was just us giving regular updates via Clive's website, and that was how everything began in the first place. Is Clive wanted an announcement made that I was going to be searching for the footage. And as a result, we put that on his website, and that's when Horror Hound reached out to us and said, if you find anything, let us know. We want first rights on screening whatever you find, and we found it, and they interviewed me. It was the first time I'd ever been interviewed. It was awesome. And from that momentum, everything just kept picking up, and it was, it wasn't as much of a roll the boulder uphill as it could have been. It was everyone saw that this was happening, and at every turn there was someone else there to help carry the weight.
And did you ever have to tap any of the actors or anything to come in and re-record lines or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we reconnected with a lot of the actors, and this is one of my favorite Nightbreed stories. I got a couple involving the actors, but one of them was when we started screening the work print around. Ann Bobby and Craig Sheffer both came out to North Carolina, and they got to see the old footage for the first time. And I remember sitting next to Ann Bobby, just watching her lean forward, just completely speechless, watching all this old footage. And at the end of it, she turned to me and said, watching that was like living in the same house all my life, only to find that there was a whole other wing I never knew about. And so that was really cool. And then when it came time to edit everything, as I mentioned, there were a lot of the studio had come in and changed a lot of the voices of the actors, and so what we had was the original film footage, which had the studio re-recorded lines, and the VHS footage, which had the original voices. So when we put the final cut together, there was still this audio pass that was just rough as can be. And we were able to get Doug Bradley, who most famously plays Pinhead. And I don't know why you would want to redub Pinhead's voice. It makes no sense to me. But in the theatrical version of Nightbreed, Doug plays this character named Lylesburg, who's sort of the vizier of the Nightbreed. And in the film, he's played with this very strange German accent. And that's not Doug at all. And that's not even Doug doing a bad German accent. But when we put it together, some of the scenes are Doug, some of the scenes are this German actor. And so we reached out to Doug and said, here are the lines that the German actor still says. Would you mind, because Doug lives in Pennsylvania, and we couldn't get him into the studio. We didn't have enough time. We're, at this point, we're trying to get picture lock, and we're coming up against the gun, and we're trying to get the sound in at the same time. And so it's just everything is, last minute, never enough time. And we just asked Doug, would you record some stuff on your iPhone and send it to us? And God bless him, he did. And we sent those to our audio designer, to Justin, and he put them in, and it sounds beautiful. And the craziest thing was there's a character named Rachel who, much to my surprise, does not sound like an old gypsy in real life. And when we found some of her scenes on VHS, she has this very flat kind of Canadian accent. But in the film, she has this huge, broad, Eastern European gypsy kind of vibe going on. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know whose idea that was. But she sounded so different that there was nothing we had. We couldn't find her, and we couldn't find anyone to match her voice. So rather than utilize her, rather than try and go back to normal to scale her back, which we did with Doug, we had to play her up. And so I have a longtime friend named Alexis De La Rocha, who she's a singer and an artist and an actress. And I reached out to her because she has this sort of essence that I don't know. It was actually my wife's idea. I was playing the film for her, and I said, I don't know what to do. And my wife said, ask Alexis. I totally think she could do this. And we called Alexis into Andrew's editing bay, and Andrew set up the microphones, and we played Rachel's original lines, where, she sounds like the gypsy, and we said, okay, match this. And then we played the VHS lines, and so Alexis had to match the timing perfectly of the Rachel's, flat voice and make it sound like this outlandish gypsy voice. And we had her do it a couple of different ways, and ultimately the direction that ended up in the film that got the reading we wanted was pretend you're doing an impression of the Count from Sesame Street. And that's the cut that you hear in the film. And I defy you to tell me which is which. You know, we're getting two recordings 25 years apart, and it is impeccable. It was this minor miracle, and I can't believe the way it all came together, especially in 30 days at the end of this 4.5-year run.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to ask the questions. I love this film, and I'm glad that other people do too.
Thanks for checking out another edition of listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie podcast. Nightbreed, the Director's Cut screens October 12th at Landmark's Hillcrest Cinemas in San Diego. It's part of FilmOut's monthly screening series. Next week, the horrors continue with another podcast from Horrible Imaginings Film Festival. This time, I check in with horror authors and talk to a filmmaker about adapting horror literature. I'll play some clips from campfire readings of horror tales by their authors, including one with a mime and another couple with clowns. Turn the lights down low, make some s'mores, and take a listen next Friday. Also, a reminder to check out my 31 Days of Italian Horror on my Cinema Junkie Facebook page. If listening to Cinema Junkie is becoming something of an addiction, please consider supporting the podcast by going to kpbs.org/feedthejunkie. And if you're looking for a cheaper way to support the show, just leave us a review the next time you're downloading a podcast on iTunes. So, till our next film fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by Splatero, helping homeowners pay off debt or for home improvements by offering streamlined access to your home's equity with no additional monthly payments or new debt. Splatero provides a lump sum payment in exchange for a share of your home's future value. Learn more at splatero.com.